trying to get an opinion to a coach who has obviously thought about a lot of the answers.
Yeah. And you're like, would you pass it more?
Yeah. And it's actually, I really appreciated McGeaney getting so annoyed at those questions over the last few years.
Yeah.
Now, I've actually done a bit of coaching and I was like, of course I thought about that.
Yes. It definitely is like going to Joe Schmidt with a half-baked plan. It feels like we have done... Which way do these headphones go? It feels like we have done more than 2 days.
It's mad, isn't it?
Yeah. It is.
How are you feeling? How's your energy?
It's just intense. It is. Just,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah. And they said you wouldn't make it to day 4 and you're...
Yeah, well, you're the
You're nearly
same. Like,
there.
you're on a trial run here as well.
I know, yeah.
Probation period.
Day 3, everyone. We made it. We're here. Conán is here as well. Afternoon, evening, morning. Hello to you.
Day 3. Day 3.
Big day. It's a landmark day.
Yeah.
So, plenty going on. We have had a lot of correspondence, ranging from all sorts of things. Somebody wondered when we did the Paul O'Connell interview yesterday, which I thought was a valid question. I didn't really tee that up in too much depth yesterday. It was last week, the night before Emerging Ireland camp started. He was up an evening early. The players were all coming in the next morning, the Wednesday morning. So it was last Tuesday evening. They're obviously playing today in South Africa. So that was when we chatted to him. Somebody pointed out I was giving Ugart and Matthias de Ligt maybe a pass on the Van de Ven run by saying, well, maybe they didn't actually know just how fast he was. It's possible. And somebody pointed out, of course, de Ligt is in the Dutch squad with Van de Ven. No excuses for him. Maybe Ugart gets a semi-pass. Probably not if you're Damien Delaney.
Yeah.
But de Ligt, no excuse. You knew what was coming.
I thought they were taking you to task for just assuming that professional footballers might not know what a really good professional footballer is like, so that would have been fair enough as well. But like on the WhatsApp underbellies, there's still arguments going on about who is most to blame about that goal. I mean, and that is the beauty of the Ten Hag era coming to an end.
Coming to an end, yeah. We have GAA chat coming up. Really good GAA chat coming up. Conor McKeon, Colm Keys, both big parts of the GAA coverage here at The Independent. On a couple of things, the Rules Committee efforts are about to be televised. The revolution about to be televised. So we're going to chat to the lads about that. And also there are whispers that the International Rules Series is going to be revived. So I'll get your thoughts about all that at the end of the podcast when you hear what the boys have to say. A lot of emails. We had discussed our Not the Monday panel situation. It's a situation. And ask, any ideas out there, shoot them in.
Yeah, and you'll shoot them down as they come in.
Well, not necessarily, but I kind of thought, well, people will be too busy. We've had about 45 emails. People not too busy. So do you want me to hit you?
Let's do it.
Okay. This ongoing situation has to be rectified soon, by the way. We can't just have endless weeks of emails being read out with bad name ideas. We're going to have to make a call. So Trevor in Sydney, he had a suggestion, but he was also just sending good wishes. I live in Sydney. I listen to sports podcasts and shows each day. And the longer I live abroad, there's a slightly melancholy point. The longer I live abroad, the stronger the significance that they have for me as a source of keeping my connection to Ireland as strong as I can. I miss home often. Which is, so I can imagine it's a long way away. Okay, here we go. Alex Mason, panel beaters. We had the upshot from Nigel Gallagher. We had the gantry, Ben Woods. The review room, Kevin Barry. Know the score, Brian Walsh. There were some early ones in. Your face says nothing.
Yeah, I mean,
grabbing.
Running order is still the strongest, I think. I think we're all in agreement with that.
Yeah. Well, on the Monday post-mortem, I did have a moment where obviously I panned it quite heavily and then walked out and Dave outside, part of the Indo Daily team, said post-mortem was my idea. And I don't know Dave well enough to have panned his idea publicly yet, but
But like, this is day 3, and we spent what feels like maybe 4 podcasts now talking about coaches and the impact they can have on players and the negativity. And this is the culture that you're now creating, Joe. You're creating a culture of fear that people are afraid to bring their great creative ideas towards you because you're just going to slam them all down like the running order.
Yeah, like the running order. David Sadlier went with lunatics. However, he spelt the Lewin part as in Lewin, as
That's
in
nice.
Monday Oscuelga, which reads well. I'm not sure.
No.
Podcast, if it's going to... land. People will just think after a while it's called lunatic.
I know what you're thinking global with this podcast. You don't want to be putting off other people outside of Ireland.
I'd like to think we'll have more than the listeners we currently have in a couple of weeks, and therefore, if I'm just saying welcome to lunatics, they'll think, not a great.
You're thinking big. I got one from Aidan O'Hara in the office as well, which I think is potentially one of our strongest ones.
Okay. Do you want to keep that in your back pocket?
We'll keep it in the back pocket, yeah.
Okay. I'll keep going. So, special shout out to Cathal O'Halloran, who sent in just the 9 suggestions, but had the self-awareness to say, I expect them all to be rejected. Cathal, you were correct. He went, but like Cathal, in fact, I'm joking, obviously. He did put them into, newspaper-related sections, more general suggestions. There was like an organisational quality to his email. So he had like the Monday supplement, the Monday edition. More general. I guess the most kind of quirky one was mostly ball sports, but that we would come to call it mostly BS. And I thought,
Okay.
bit of self-deprecation maybe.
Yeah, I like that from Cathal, and I like that he's gone to the effort of breaking down sections for you, knowing the demands that you're placing on this.
Absolutely. The Higher Performance Podcast, invoice in the post, please, said Jay Carey.
Not bad.
Cathal Garrity, first time ever emailing or writing into a podcast or news article. Anyway.
Had to be for this, didn't it?
Yeah, really, Cathal. This was the one. Thinking of a name for the podcast after listening to the first episode, and he went with Peaking Early. I hope not. And then Ger from Limerick. I thought there was something in this maybe. Best wishes with the new pod, fellas. How about Pack It Indo? So not Pack It In Though, Pack It Indo. Is that one that I'll have to over-enunciate every time I mention it? Welcome to Pack It Indo, is what I'll have to say.
How do you feel about puns in shows? It's something that I've never been a big fan of, well, except when we're trialing the Gaelic thing there. Lunatics is quite creative and quite clever, but I'm not a big fan of the puns.
It's still very much a big part of football punditry culture. Like Match of the Day, for instance, it's very pun heavy, and they seem to find them terribly funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sort of with you.
I love a pun, but naming a show after it, like obviously I've gone with Running Order. It couldn't be more black and white. It couldn't be more boring, I suppose.
Yeah. Gar Phelan went with The Warm Down.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking if we occasionally do a Friday panel, we can call that The Warm Up.
Or could Monday be a warm up because we're warming up for the week?
You've ruined it. We're overthinking.
Yeah.
Gone. All right, Gary, we almost birthed your idea, but then we killed it just as quickly, I think.
I ruined it on him.
Indo Sports Jam from Ben Cormley. And Keith, Texas said, I don't know if this is Keith, Texas or Keith in Texas. Monday, Bloody Monday.
That's good.
Yeah?
Yeah, I like that.
And then, the only other one, it sort of came up at the end of the panel when we were talking about Johnny Sexton and the Lions going on the lash in 2017. And we were talking, organised fun. And I thought, organised fun.
To be fair,
there might be something in that.
I didn't want to like that because of the attitude that you brought, to all our suggestions. But I think you're onto something with it. I think
organised fun. Yeah. And then it's not day specific. Like, this is how much overthought. Dan McDonnell, I kid you not, voice, the WhatsApp voice recorder. He was like, listen, just been thinking. Dan's a busy man. I'm just been. Have you thought about, like, do you plan on working bank holidays? Because if it's Monday related and then you do the panel on Tuesday, that could throw things. Anyway, I'll leave it with you.
Yeah.
Which I didn't get back to. We're obviously not working bank holidays.
Well, that's why organised fun then would be so fitting, because it's organised for whenever we organise.
Correct. Anyway. Emails about that, or indeed, maybe more to the point. Anything else you want to email us about, do email, because we're reading them, and some very funny ones in there as well, just more general nice wishes, which is great. Indosportpodcast@independent.ie is where you can get us. Before we get GA things going on, sorry, you're pointing at me.
I'm going to give you Aidan's suggestion.
Oh, yeah. Our deputy head of sport.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Monday Morning Quarterback is obviously a well-established show.
Sure.
He went with Monday Morning Cornerback.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let it sit with you.
Would it have to be a GA show more than a general show?
Or American football as well. It's basically just picked another American football position.
Champions League last night. I suspect I did what a lot of people did, maybe thinking Arsenal PSG might be the game. Obviously, Celtic last week were very impressive and exciting. So I recorded Celtic on Virgin and went for some Arsenal PSG. And Arsenal were just very assured, impressive. A vibe of there are bigger days ahead for us in this competition, which is pretty impressive against PSG. Even Luis Enrique came out afterwards and said they were just better than us. They were impressive. Havertz with a header, Trossard, really good cross, and then Saka from a set piece. They really like celebrating set pieces. Like, this is our thing when they do it, And it really lent itself because they were all at the back post, and it was of everyone's going to dash across. And Saka got ahead of his man, Barcola, who's maybe not the man to have at the front post, more of an attacking type. He just kind of rooted to the spot. But because they were all moving together like in a flying V, they all just kept running. It just looked cool. It just, they just love scoring from set pieces. So they were good. I did have a moment with the PSG team where, there are names, obviously, Hakimi and Marquinhos in the back four, and Vitinha in midfield is a really good player and very familiar to us. But there definitely is like a thing of refamiliarising yourself with PSG post the 1.95 billion spent in the last 11 years. Yeah. So let me hit you. I had to Google quite a few of these guys. And some of them, it was just to jog your memory from last year. But for instance, with Vitinha in midfield, they had Zaire Emery, who's 18 years of age. PSG Academy. Did play some last season. But again, so 18-year-old. And the other side of Vitinha is João Neves, who's only 20. Again, Portuguese international, but it's old man Vitinha here at 24. So you have a 20-year-old and an 18-year-old. And then the front three was Bradley Barcola, who's 22, has 7 French caps. Big deal and promising.
Yeah.
Lee Kang in, the South Korean, 23. And then Due, who's 19. So you have 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds. It's not unheard of. These players are not unheard of. But when you think, God, they spent $2 billion to get here. It's a complete reevaluation of everything that they are. Obviously, no Mbappe as well.
Yeah, and they only spent 180 million this summer. I mean, they're really on lean times now. So, João Neves, the only reason I would have recognised him is because Liverpool were looking for him in the summer.
Yeah.
So one of those guys you would see a YouTube compilation pop up on your timeline then as well. But you're right, the age profile is so young, and there's something a bit more charming about that PSG team now when you see that.
Yeah, but they looked young out there. Then seeing the result coming through from Dortmund, I quickly said, well, goodbye Arsenal, you're 2-0 up, you'll be fine. And went back and watched the first half of Celtic. Dortmund 7, Celtic 1. It was so striking. So there had been some talk in the build of the game. Is there a touch of transition about Dortmund post Champions League final? Maybe are they there for the taking? Perhaps Celtic, very very impressive round one, and from the first second, Celtic went on this all out full court press, really high up, and Dortmund played around it with total ease and got through. And you thought, okay, that might put manners on Celtic. They might drop back here and just we're away from home. There's the yellow wall. Dortmund they just beat our press, eyes closed there. And they just didn't. It was all out, full on, trying to put Dortmund under pressure, but Dortmund didn't feel the pressure. And David Delaney did a really great piece at half time where he basically just showed that Celtic's midfield was just Callum McGregor as a 6 sitting in front of the back four.
Yeah.
And everybody else separated from them further up the pitch. And so it's poor old Callum McGregor and Liam Scales trying to hold down the fort as Dortmund just keep coming and coming and coming. Rodgers said afterwards he thought maybe Celtic got a bit spooked by the early goals, and maybe they did. There were 1 or 2 mistakes which crept in and led to goals where maybe you're just kind of your head spinning. But Rodgers massively culpable for 7-1. Not maybe for a loss, but for 7-1. The way Celtic approached that first half, 5-1 down at half time, just this relentless naivety. Even Richard Dunn on commentary was just sort of saying, I don't really understand what they're doing here. Yeah, this makes no sense. You've just conceded 3 goals. Can everyone just relax? But no, still, they're waving back at Callum McGregor. Good you keep doing it. We're going to wait up here. And it's a bad one. Their record defeat in Europe is 7-0. This was 7-1. I don't think that's much consolation. Dortmund, by the way, were good, good.
Very good, but it really smacked of, when a team is moving up a level, and this is what happens. We see it all the time in the Premier League, and how often then do these teams get scolded by the seasoned pundits. It's this is a different level now. You might have dominated the Championship, but I think the big difference when teams move up to the Premier League, or in this case to a really good Champions League team, is it's the pace of all the players, and it's how easily they deal with pressure on the ball. So, this is exactly the sort of thing that undone Celtic. Then Dortmund don't care that Celtic are pushing up on them. They can hold the ball.
We'll be okay.
Somebody will show for me. I'll pass it to him. He'll take a good touch and turn around. And then the pace. I mean, Celtic have just equalised. He got a bit of luck. It was headed onto the hip and it's gone in. But then, like a minute later, it's just a foot race. The ball's just played in behind Adeyemi and Trusty.
Yeah.
And who's going to win that race? We know who's going to win that race. We know who did win that race. And again, bit of fortune, deflection. But like you say, you can put that down to bad luck. 7 goals, there's a common denominator then.
Oh, yeah. Whenever I think of Celtic, by the way, I always just think of Donegal in terms of Irish support, and I'm just conscious you're obviously right next door. Are Celtic massively supported as well in Derry, or is there maybe more of a no, we support Derry in this part of the world, or are Celtic still just like as big a phenomenon in Derry as they might be in Donegal, for instance? Celtic
could be huge in Derry, yeah. Lots of day trippers go from Derry to Belfast, get the boat over, go to the Celtic games on a Saturday, be back that same night. I used to support Celtic and Villa growing up. I mean, it sort of felt like you had to just sort of say you supported Celtic as well, and a lot of it I think is to do with your identity as well. I mean, obviously Derry's got a big majority of nationalists, but I think you still want the people to know that you're one of that side, and it's the same the way you support Ireland. Obviously that's different because you are Irish as well. We're not going to get into that, Joe, but again, supporting Ireland, wearing the Ireland jersey shows in that part of the world what allegiance that you had or you have growing up, and Celtic would be the same. And it's obviously just the world's moving on and society's progressed, but people now still support Celtic. I sort of lost that graw over the years. Yeah, which is interesting that I stuck with the English Premier League team instead, but I think I was just watching more Premier League games, and that's why I stuck with Villa.
Well, speaking of, they're in action tonight. So Liverpool away to Bologna. They were 2-1 winners against Wolves at the weekend. Arne Slot was talking in his press conference about how much quality they have, therefore we cannot accept mediocrity. They were sort of a little bit through the motions a touch against Wolves, so we'll see what they do. But I suppose from your perspective, from a lot of people's perspective, Aston Villa, Bayern Munich is kind of just back in the big time in a real way at Villa Park. I was saying to you before we came on air, just as like a fan of neither and total neutral, like that era of English football where the European Cups are being won by obviously Villa in '82, but more so in my mind's eye and in memory, it's the Nottingham Forest era. It's Trevor Francis, it's Clough. That's all so fabled and famous, and then Villa get it. Oh yeah, and Villa of course won '82, but it doesn't conjure up the same imagery, memories, all that kind of stuff. Like '82 is just not a thing for me in the same way I suspect it might be for you.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I saw a piece with Jim White in the paper today, interviewing Tony Morley, actually, who was so good for that goal. I mean, like the commentary actually doesn't even commentate on what Morley's doing, where he's rinsing the fullback inside out and he plays the ball across for Peter Wyth to miss hit off the post. And maybe Villa, that was a sort of changing of some sort of curse where Villa got all the luck in the world there for that goal. They were being battered by Bayern Munich at the time, and then the goal even looked like, gee, they didn't have to go that tight to the post, did they have to hit it off the post and go in? But ever since then it feels like they've had no luck over the years. But I mean, this era of Aston Villa, I think, is something that has people still holding so much pride. Even somebody like me who's not from the area, somebody who wasn't even around back then, if you walk down the tunnel at Aston Villa, the trophy is there, the Champions League trophy is there. I think they played Arsenal a few weeks ago, and people thought that they did that as a stunt because Arsenal haven't won the European Cup. And even something like that is a great reminder that Villa can compete. They have competed at this level. But to your point about the Nottingham Forest era, Tony Morley was saying that even back then, the Villa players were being overlooked, that he felt, for the England squad, for the recognition. And that's something that has sustained through the years then, where you would sort of think, geez, Villa aren't getting a look in here. People don't respect how good they are, and it takes a good manager to come along then to really show how good some players can be and how good a team can be. So it's amazing that all these years later, 5 years after being in the Championship, that this this fixture is back. Yeah. I mean, 2 weeks ago, it was the start off for Villa back in European football for the first time in 41 years. But they were playing young boys at 5:45, and it was like, hang on, are we still in the Conference League here? What's going on? I thought the Champions League had started. Yeah. But now Bayern at home couldn't get a ticket, no chance of it. And it's just fever pitch at the minute.
They're charging a lot for the tickets for Champions League, aren't they?
They are, yeah, they are.
It's like they're really laying it on thick.
Yeah, and it's probably a smack in the face for the fans, I suppose, who had really stuck by them as well throughout the Championship. And Villa have mega rich owners, but obviously they've been in a bit of trouble with the financial fair play over the last few years, and they've had to be very careful and very smart with what they're doing. But I'd say, going after the ticket prices isn't the way they're going to make serious inroads on it.
Mm. Well, we'll talk about that tomorrow. We'll see how we're all feeling.
Let's see how the game goes.
Let's see how it goes. I'm curious for your thoughts on the GAA situation. So we talked to Conor McKeon and Colm a short while ago. Here is what the lads had to say about the rule changes upcoming and whispers of international rules series being revived. Conor McKeon, Colm Keys, welcome.
Thanks, Joe.
Colm, great to have you. McKeon, can't get rid of you. Was flicking through the paper on Friday, saw a headline which caught the eye. It was just a very small piece. Hopes for revival of series after Burns talks. GAA President Charlotte Burns over in Australia for the 50th anniversary of Australian GAA. He was at the AFL Grand Final in Melbourne, and it seems he had talks with the AFL CEO Andrew Dillon about reviving the International Rules Series. And the line was, again, very, very short piece. Both parties keen to revive the series. And there are some talks as well about a female equivalent. Talks there are ongoing. So I thought, well, that's interesting. I hadn't heard anything about this before, Conor, and equally, I probably hadn't thought about the international rules in a long time.
No, I wonder, is this a case of, when you make friends with somebody on holidays and you promise you're definitely going to meet up when you come back, and then you've no intentions of doing it. But no, I'm not sure the world needs another international rules series. The last few iterations of it didn't exactly capture the imagination. So, and from a practical point of view, with the split season, people finish up with their county, then they go off and they play with their clubs, and increasingly you'll find that the inter-county players are using the spare time that they inevitably have in a lot of cases to go travelling and these type of things. So I'm not sure that I can see it in a pragmatic way, but I'm not really sure that it ever really worked as a sport either. There was a fascination when you came up to the tests about how were the Aussies going to handle the round ball, or who was going to exploit which rule to their benefit, and sometimes you had those very lopsided tests. But I think a lot of it came from our bloodlust, didn't it? Like, that's when they sold out Croke Park in 06 and the big row, and the clips on YouTube that have the most hits, it's not goals and points that are being scored, it's people who've been thrown into the ground and squaring up to one another. So no, it was a funny entity, and I find it hard to see what it would be in the current situation.
Colin, what do you think?
I heard something about this from the Australian side during the summer, that they were keen, and it seems that from historically and traditionally, maybe GAA and Ireland was keener on this series than Australia. That may be flipping now, and that the overtures were coming from over there, maybe to restart it, which is ironic that they're the professional body, yet it's the amateur body who will be saying, look, I don't think we've any time for this. And that's the issue here. As much as it's probably waned in its attractiveness, there simply will not be time. I cannot see how they could set aside 2 weekends either for here or over to Australia, which would be 3 weekends, when you have Tom Parsons, the Gaelic Players Association chief executive, saying, we want November as zero contact. In other words, no player makes any contact with a pitch or another player in any guise unless he's playing with his club. And the season is so condensed now. It's so frantic. Once the league kicks off and you're to championship, and there's barely any space between any of these games, and then all your club games are backloaded to the end of the season. I just don't see the time or space for the rival, notwithstanding that maybe it's all got a bit too serious here, that there is no element of representation outside your club and county. And obviously for third level, the All-Star Tour is gone, probably not to come back. The Interprovincial Series, which was on the slab for a long, long time, and obviously went in the middle of the last decade. But that was a different form of representation, away from the, the cutthroat business of club and intercounty. And it's probably, as much as anything, that we're saying there's no room for it, and how could you even countenance it? It's the way the season has gone and the way the games have gone, that you can't find time to go and represent and maybe enjoy doing something different. And in many ways, it's probably an indictment that you can't even consider this, that everything has just got so damn serious.
Yeah, interesting. I didn't think it'd be shut down so quickly just for those logistical reasons, but the way you paint the picture, it's
maybe
difficult
I'm
to see
getting
the
the
space.
wrong, but that
Maybe.
if you're,
That's your
when you
sense.
sense the conversations around, well, we want pre-seasons gone, and they're gone, albeit temporarily, but probably gone for good, when they didn't stage them this year with so many potential new rules coming into the game and the opportunity to play 33 games to road test these before the league. When they're gone, I think they're gone. So there is a shortening of the season all the time for good, solid player welfare reasons.
Yeah.
But I would imagine a lot of the top players would still like to test themselves in the environment against Australian AFL players. I still think there would be an appetite among the top players to get together, but the pressures from their intercounty managers and their clubs. And obviously, I don't know, would the GPA be supportive of it, given that zero contact position?
It's not to mention trial matches, training camps.
You're talking 6 to 8 weeks. And with the way the season is, the following season, there's a rest and recuperation element that really I think managers would be pretty steadfastly against.
I wonder what the appetite... so let's say they could jump all of those hurdles and they sound significant. What's the appetite amongst the public? Because... we were just chatting before we came on air, and you guys were listing off the ones of recent years, and I have to say none of them register with me. I don't overly remember them.
Well, I'd say if you go back to it, what's the last one that stands out? 2006.
Yes.
When Sean Boylan threatened to pull his team off after the first quarter because there was such thuggery in that game. No other word to describe it. I mean, that was one of the darkest days yet for some, probably hiding behind the curtain. It was a delight in many respects, but it was blatant thuggery, and that had permeated through the previous year in Australia as well.
Well, to jog people's memory, or even younger listeners, sorry to say we're all getting a bit old, this is a long time ago now, the 1980s, they had 4 series in that decade, and then the high point for this series was 1998 to 06. Post 04, it was the Cormac McAnallen Cup that they played for. And so 98 it kicked off, like huge interest, huge fanfare, 2 matches, winner on aggregate on points. And, as you said, what did people like about it? The fights. Here's a clip from 2004, second match of the 2. Kieran MacDonald has been brilliant in the first match. And so before the whistle is thrown in, as Marty Morrissey is trying to do his hello from the 7th floor, it all kicks off, and Marty's on the point of saying, well, you hate to see it, but his Australian co-commentator was thrilled to see it.
Late in Australia, but we're delighted to have you here. As you can see, we're on the 7th floor of the Hogan stand.
It's on already! There's a fight breaking out already! It's on before the game! Oh, have a look at this, Dean Solomon into McDonald. It's on already at Kirk Park before we even start. Well, we expected the fireworks to begin, and straight away it's on. McDonald's been targeted by Solomon, and an all-in brawl started here on the 45. Already it started. Spineless, gutless is what the Australians have been called all week. And they've come out ready to go, and it's on before the game has started. What might be late in Australia, but they're all up ready to go now. And Kirkpatrick comes alive.
But you hate to see it. Marty, you hate to see it, don't you?
That was one of the more curious innovations that they had in the broadcast of it, whereby RTE and the Australian broadcasters would share the commentary booth, and very clearly Marty and his Australian counterpart were in different gears for the start of that throw.
We think his name is Eddie Maguire. We're actually trying to track him down
Eddie
for
Maguire,
a conversation.
he was president of one of the clubs over there. Was a
Collingwood.
Yeah, Collingwood at one stage. He was commentator.
But that was, and even the innovation of the Australian commentary and the Irish commentary and the simulcast, there was something very exciting about it then. Yeah. And like you could not miss the start of the match for the possibility they were going to try and take out Kieran MacDonald.
Yeah, and it was just like there's a generation of people that are probably around my age that couldn't tell you any of the top AFL players now, but they know who Jason Ackermanis is. And I'm not sure how good a career Jason Ackerman has ultimately had in the AFL.
Yes.
But he is certainly synonymous with that period of.
I actually think that clip. I think that was '06.
Do you?
I think that's '06, and it wasn't Kieran MacDonald. I think it was Graham Geraghty.
It was Graham Geraghty.
No, well, watching the footage, MacDonald
it
emerges
is
from a
04.
heap with his beautiful blonde locks
Okay.
all over his face. It's
But
like
it
he's
was
been in a mosh
really
pit.
bad at the start of the 06
as well.
test, the second test in Croke Park, because there had been a bit of history, a bit of residue from the test in Galway the previous Saturday night. And
Yes.
Graham Geraghty was involved in an incident. And during the week, I remember being at a press conference over in one of it might have been the Barclay Court where the Australians were staying, one of those hotels at the time. And they were promising open slather.
That's
or
right,
slather, however. So they were openly promising a hit, and it was Geraghty that was the target because of something happened. And Geraghty ended up at a disciplinary hearing between those two games. And this is another, what you call an innovation. It was open to the media. So I covered Geraghty's hearing up in Croke Park. It was in one of the open rooms in Croke Park, and he came in and he gave evidence on his behalf, and there was a disciplinary panel which included some GA officials and AFL officials. Like, that had never happened that it'd be open. You wouldn't even get an outcome or a result from the GAA now from a hearing or anything like that. You know, you would work hard to find the outcome. But here, this was the Australian way. It was open. So you listen to Graham Geraghty giving testimony. Sean Walsh, the former Kerry chairman of the county board, he defended. He was the tour manager, I think, at the time, and he defended. So this was all open. The prosecution and the defence and the whole tribunal disciplinary hearing was open to the media that week. But it was building with that open slather comment, and it all kicked off. So maybe it was MacDonald, and maybe I can't remember that at the start of the 04 test, but certainly Geraghty was knocked out in his...
And it's kind of chilling then when you see the hit on him, and he is stretchered off.
Yeah.
Like, you can't emphasise that enough. Geraghty is stretchered off, and it leads to the immortal lines from Kieran McGeeney post-match in '06.
If you want to box, say you want to box and we'll box. If you want to play football, say you want to play football and we'll play football.
And then Boylan was emotional.
Don't give me that as sportsmanship. Don't give me that as trying to promote a series. Don't give me that. That's thuggery, and that's all that it is.
Geraghty obviously being one of his Meath players, so he's extra. He's feeling extra heightened, I would think. Is it '06 that kills it? Do they get together and say, we just can't have this ever again? When I say this, I mean the violence.
Yeah, so we can't ever have it. So the GA, Nicky Brennan was president at the time, and the following year's series was suspended, as much as I recall. And there was a summit meeting out in Dubai, and Anthony Tohill was one of those, the former Derry footballer who had strong association with various international rules and a very good grasp of the game. He was one of those that were part of the delegation to try and bring new measures, that suspensions in Australia, there was never suspensions carrying over into the AFL game, so it was open season. It was a free hit. So this was introduced. There was other various measures, and the season was revived in '08. Ireland went down and won it, and there was about 4 series after that, but none of them really stand out in the memory. There was some... one of the years, I think it was 17, Conor McManus was really exceptional for Ireland down there. But I think there was a bug in the Irish camp leading up to that test. They lost that series.
I don't think the public at large remembers series after '06.
'06 is the standout because of those comments, because of what happened Geraghty, because of what happened in between and Galway. And that really is the lingering memory of that.
I remember covering a test in Limerick,
Yeah.
and I can't recall the year, and I couldn't tell you anything that happened in the match, but I do recall the fact that night being in Peter Clohessey's pub and the Irish team and the Australian team mingling very happily, and that was the moment where we all wrote off the idea that we might go to the second test and see a repeat of the violence that we were all secretly
hoping for.
Kind of craving.
So is that the worry with this series and its revival? In that, ironically, in '06, I mean, if they'd had a series in '07 and let the thing boil away, I mean, they could have had dynamic pricing for Croke Park. Like, I mean, it would have been the hottest ticket. The public appetite was kind of all-time high. But as the last decade has shown, if you take away the violence, which, if we're being honest, you just have to. I mean, it was ridiculous. If you take away the violence, is the sport actually good enough, interesting enough to revive? Is there enough interest in it?
I think maybe not. think maybe not. There are bits from each game that both will take back to their own games, and there was certainly a sharing of intelligence and a sharing of information and habits and all of that. Ironically,
The fly goalkeeper.
yeah. But also, if you look, Australian rules has developed the hook kick, the round the house kick in recent years. There's a lot more of it from angles. So rather than straight through punting, they're now kicking the ball round the house from an angle, obviously straight in front of goals, and that's been noticeable in one respect. And obviously there's the speed and movement and the athleticism that's in the Australian game that has been brought into Gaelic football as well, so that there is a bit of cross-pollination. There has been some elements of cross-pollination there, and we're talking about rules that are on. AFL have really shaken up their rules to make a faster, better game, and those who watch it, and I was speaking to Paul Early, actually, former international rules manager and first player to sign a professional contract, and he's an avid watcher, and he says this year more than ever, he says it's been a really, really strong game because of the rules changes. But whether the product is there, I mean, it's still a very young series, even after that. How many games has ever been played? Is there 30, 40, something like that? I'm just offhand, but the series is up and running since 1984. There's been huge gaps there, so really it was in its infancy and didn't really get off the ground. But there's a bit of novelty about it, and I'll go back to the point that I made originally. Enjoyment. Where's the breakout from the monotony of a season? I won't call playing for your club and your county monotony. That's probably wrong.
No, but it's sprinkling a glamour.
But just something different.
Yes.
Just something different.
Same question to you, though. Without the violence, is the sport good enough?
No, I don't think it is. I think that there's a difference between a sport being entertaining and it being potentially fascinating. And we watch it for the potential fascination to go, well, which is the bigger concession here, the round ball or the tackle? And how are the Irish going to adapt to the thing that they don't naturally do? How are the Aussies going to adapt to the thing that they don't have in their game? So we watch it from that very analytical point of view, but I'm not sure that it's that entertaining because and not ironically, but maybe pertinently, the international rules, in my memory, the thing that really stunted it as a flowing game was the advanced mark. You had forwards take, and I remember thinking, somebody's catching the ball inside their 21 here. Why are they stopping? But it was because it was a free shot on goal, and for some reason we've not only kind of watched how that slowed down that game, we've adapted it to our own game. But the halcyon days that I can remember, and I don't know why this went out of it, was when people like Kieran McManus and Eamon O'Hara and Kieran Whelan were bursting through and scoring long goals from range. But I think the tackle became such a big thing that to be caught in possession was so punitive that people just let go the ball much more quickly to open up those goal chances. But on that question, the subject that Colm mentioned about the players, I spoke to a former international rules cap last week, and he made the point that he absolutely loved the idea of playing for Ireland and mixing with the players from the other counties. And he said the same thing about because he got the very last interprovincial series as well. And players love that sort of thing because it's a bit of a release valve. Whatever about the prestige of playing for Ireland or playing for your province, it's just a different thing, and it's out of the usual pressures that come associated with being one of the top players on an inter-county team. And players do love it.
Okay.
I have to say, I remember that one thing that stands out from that 06 fracas early on was most of the Irish players were being pinned to the ground, the one that was able to flip his opponent was Kieran McGeady.
He's been waiting for the moment.
Having been pinned to the ground himself, there was a flip in the middle of the field, and he was the one to come out on top in his 1-to-1 battle.
And after that match, there was a very fraught press conference where Kevin Sheedy, who was the Australian manager, he called the Irish media a shower of con men. So it became very embattled. And actually, the late Jim Steins was very much involved. He was a selector, was he, with the Australian team?
I think so. Yeah, he was. That's right. Yeah, that was a very heated press conference. A bunch of con men.
Yeah, it wasn't just the players versus the players. It became very entrenched.
Actually, the AFL chief executive Andrew Demetriou, he came in and addressed the media after that to just try and calm things down. I think it was, but it was that was fractious. That was a fractious couple of weeks. All right. Right down to the tribunal and the threats, I suppose, during the week.
Sounds great. Bring it
back. Good times. Let's talk Rules Committee, Football Review Committee, fellas. So Jim Gavin and his team. Again, you have to remind yourself of the luminaries on this team. Eamon Fitzmaurice, James Horan, Michael Murphy, Malachy O'Rourke, Colm Collins of Clare, amongst others, have been tasked with improving the game. I don't want to say saving the game of football, but improving the game. They talk themselves, they have to balance innovation with respect for tradition and not completely abandon the last 100 plus years. Just to get context here, obviously there has been grumbling about Gaelic football forever. Is it Jarlath Burns who has driven this? This is his brainchild. He has set up this committee and asked them to do this. This is a Burns innovation?
Very much so.
Okay.
There probably was a little bit of form last year when the previous coaching and games development chair, John Tobin, the former Galway footballer and manager and Roscommon manager, he looked for an expanded game intelligence. The GA runs this game intelligence. Rob Carroll from Gaelic Stats runs it, and he looked for an expanded documentation of trends in the game going back to 2011 to pull all that together. And he invited a number of players, managers, some of whom are on the committee now. But that wasn't really related. In the meantime, Jarlath Burns was making an approach to Jim Gavin and had a series of meetings, and it's one of the pillars of his presidency. Obviously, hurling development is one, and amateur status and reducing the load on players. But I think already we can probably say that Jarlath Burns' presidency will, by and large, rise or fall, and more likely rise on the back of this committee, because the level of work that they've put in over the last six months in terms of meetings, consultation, obviously the sandbox games as well. But I was calculating, just looking at some of the details between all the focus groups, everything. I would say Jim Gavin as chair must have been at 60 to 70 meetings in relation to this already. The committee themselves, it's 31 on the document here that we're looking at, but it's actually up to about 34 now. There's been about 6 or 7 games. They've consulted widely, even down to, they've consulted everybody, senior referees groups, management. They've brought everybody on board. They've tied everything together as much as possible, and they've come up with a plan. But to answer your question, yes, Jarlath Burns, because it's all a lot of people have been talking about. I mean, we've had these discussions time and again about the game, and we've picked out games. We go back to Mayo Loud last year. That's, is that ground zero for all of this?
Over it. Yeah.
Maybe Kerry, Derry this year. You're picking out games.
Yeah.
And of course, there's very good games as well. And of course, there's great moments within those games. And there is absolutely no doubt that the skill levels, the athleticism, everything is much, much better than it ever was. Of course it is. The players are more accurate. They're probably better decision makers. But that's almost a perfect storm, and they're so good that they're making less mistakes. And mistakes, in many ways, make for a less predictable game. And that's the predictable nature of the game, that you just know what's coming next. That's what has to be diverted.
Well, it's interesting you talk about the changes in AFL. I suspect it's not a coincidence that we've reached this point of sports science and fitness and skill levels requiring changes in the rules, because it just changes the nature of the game. I can't, Conor, imagine the reality of sitting through 70 meetings about making Gaelic games better. That's a commitment on Jim Gavin.
Especially one chair by Jim Gavin.
Yeah.
I was at the last press briefing, and if anybody was in any doubt as to why Jim Gavin was such a successful manager, they just have to watch him in this environment as well, as a strategist, as an organizer, as an absolute driver of everything, to be as complete in all your work and to have everything backed up. Like Jim Gavin, people might have this idea that he's some kind of ideologue, and maybe that these rules will be flights of fancy because of the way he wants to play football. But there's none of that whatsoever. Right. Everything is totally backed up by numbers, by statistics, and you can even see it in the, just to give some context.
Well, can I just tell you, because it's fascinating, and Gavin is one of these figures where we know there's something very special at play, and yet he shows us none of it in the main. Are you hearing through the grapevine? Are others also putting in the hours he's putting in? Is he?
They have to. it's that simple. They were asked onto the committee, but like even the makeup of the committee is very instructive too, because obviously Malachy O'Rourke was back in management, and then Eamon Fitzmaurice and James Horan, two of the rivals of Jim Gavin's when he played there. But I think there's kind of an acceptance there, in as much as people like to blame inter-county managers for the way Gaelic football is played. They are also the most influential figures in why Gaelic football is played the way it is.
And what's your sense of the dynamic? Are they deferring to Gavin, do you think?
I would imagine so, yeah.
I would say they realise, sitting in on some of those meetings and the relentlessness of this, that they realise, my God, there it is.
I thought we were having a coffee and just chatting about,
there it
should
is.
we kick
And
it
I
more?
would say for, obviously, all the rivals of that era, of the Jim Gavin era, and the main rivals, obviously, were Kerry, Mayo, Donegal, well, Malachy O'Rourke is now with Tyrone. I think they've got an insight into what just drove Dublin with the as I said, the relentlessness of
so
it.
thorough.
And every I is dotted and T crossed. He refers back to management. They refer back to management. They refer back to the GAA Standing Committee on Playing Rules, which is the body that implements playing rule changes. So he's covered every base on this.
Okay.
And it's looking like everything that they have come up with as enhancements and on a trial basis, I would think everything is going to be drafted as rule and put to Central Council next month for a special Congress. So it's very much on.
Here's what we know thus far then over the summer. There have been 5 sandbox games already. And then later this month, I guess that this was kind of the hook for the conversation, there will be 4 games on television, RTÉ and TG Car, a mini shield type competition over a weekend. The 2 semi-finals will be on a Friday night on TG Car, and then the final and some kind of a 3rd, 4th place playoff will be on RTÉ2 and RTÉ News over the weekend. Members of the public can attend the matches as well, and we're going to see these rules. In effect, I guess we'll see the 5 sandbox games played out amongst the public. Who is playing in these games?
It's an interprovincial tournament. So it's essentially, well, the intention is that it's going to be 4 provinces, a bit like the Railway Cup as it was, minus players, obviously, who are still involved with their clubs.
So here are the rules which made the headlines and grabbed people's attention. And then I'm just curious for what jumps out to you guys, or what other rules I'm forgetting. A shot from outside the 40-metre arc equals 2 points. Goal scored is 4 points. Then 3 outfield players plus your goalkeeper have to stay inside your own 65. Now, your goalkeeper is allowed to cross the 65, but if that happens, then another outfield player has to drop back. So at all times, there are 4 players. That was the most recent version of that.
No, the goalkeeper can cross the 65. The goalkeeper can move as the goalkeeper wants, but they can only receive the ball past the 65.
It's actually, I think,
they can only receive the ball.
I think it's going to be refined as the halfway line.
Yeah, well, that's
looking at a halfway line.
So as in, if I'm the cornerback and I get the ball and I want to pop it back to my goalkeeper, I can't do that anymore.
You can do it if you're in the large parallelogram. This is where it gets just a little bit complicated. So if the goalkeeper is in his own large parallelogram and one of his colleagues is also in that space, in that large parallelogram, the keeper can receive a pass. The only other place the keeper can receive a pass from is over the halfway line. So he has to be over the halfway line. He can still stand where goalkeepers regularly stand between the 20-metre line and the 45-metre line to sweep and to nip in and take a ball away from the opposition. But it can't in that up to the halfway line, with the exception of that large parallelogram, the goalkeeper will not be permitted to receive a pass from a colleague.
So they want to kill goalkeeper coming out and playing 1-2s inside.
It's to encourage
his
the
own
press, really, because no team is going to press up when the goalkeeper is always the out ball, because you have to commit an extra one of your outfield players and you're leaving gaps in behind.
And it goes back to what I said, our players are so good now at retaining possession, evasion skills, passing, everything. They're so good that they can just do this so easily, seamlessly play the ball around. If you look at the end of the 2017 All-Ireland final, Dublin Mayo, Bernard Brogan gets the sideline and the ball is put back. Stephen Cluxton in that last movement before Niall Scully gets the ball up and kicks it and the game is over and Dublin have 3 in a row. Cluxton gets the ball 3 times in receipt. Now Mayo are pushing hard on them. I still expect Dublin would have retained it. They got out of a couple of tricky scrapes along the Cusick stand for that game. But Cluxton gets it. He's the outlet 3 times to be able to relieve the pressure and get a different point of attack or clearance. So it is a very crucial weapon in terms of retaining possession and to break up that possession sequence. That restriction on the goalkeeper.
That is a big change, and goalkeepers, quite a few of them, will hate this. Do we think it's a good move?
I think it's a good move to, as I said, to disrupt the possession chain. I think it's a good move because of that outlet.
Okay,
and we'll see how it plays out.
Sure.
But the keeper can still stand out. The keeper can still interrupt an opposition movement, can still do all that. And the keeper can still get over the 65 or the halfway line as it is as well if they want to join the play. But that's a risk. Some goalkeepers, they're capable of clocking up kilometres that other to relieve the players, those around them. They make some of the runs forward, and that's a tactic or a ploy that teams use too.
Yeah, no, I think my only problem with it is it's slightly convoluted. The issue of being able to take the pass back inside your own large parallelogram if the player is there. The reason that is there is because after initially conceiving of the rule where the keeper can only take the ball past the halfway line, they realised that in a situation late in a game where there's a load of players around the square because somebody's looking to fist in a goal, you'll slip the ball to whoever's close to you. And if it happens to be the goalkeeper and you slip the ball to them just by instinct, then you're giving away a penalty or a 14-metre free. So I just think that it's slightly convoluted. That might turn people off. But the other thing about the keeper, you can say, oh, well, will people commit the goalkeeper up to attack? But you have to remember with this other rule about the 3 up, 3 back, you're now trying to break down an 11-man defence. That's as big as a defence can be with a low block. So if you commit your goalkeeper to that attack past the halfway line, you have a serious advantage in that sort of situation. So I don't think it will actually prevent goalkeepers coming out. I don't think it will put the kibosh on, say, or on Lynch or somebody like that who comes up and regularly kicks points. But what it will do is it will disrupt those long periods of play where teams are easily able to keep the ball.
Okay, understood. Well, that's interesting. That is a big change. The mark then, I think everyone heard this and immediately thought, well, that's okay. So the mark, as I understand it, if you catch the ball and it's a mark, you get, in effect, a free hit or an advantage of sorts. You can put your head down and Darren O'Sullivan style try and score a goal. And if it doesn't work out for you, it'll be brought back and you can pop it over for your point.
Yeah, the example they used at the last briefing was, I think, the All-Ireland final, Galway Kerry 2022. I think early in the first half, David Clifford caught a ball above his head and it was kind of on. He just needed to beat one defender and he called for the mark straight away. So in that situation, David Clifford can play on, go for goal, and if he misses, he gets the free.
Okay. They were the ones I jotted down. Any other rules catching you?
I think the mark inside the 20-metre line, great in theory. The practice of that might be different. If you're a referee,
advantage rule.
Having to take the mark inside the 20-metre line. In practice, that might be difficult for referees. Not sure yet. If you're a referee further out, you're out around the middle of the field. Someone's kicking long in. It's a sunny day, low sun. You don't have linesmen. This obviously has to operate at club level too.
Yes.
You're trying to see the line of demarcation, and it's another line of demarcation. Already, there's so many. I mean, you're going to have a 40-metre arc.
Club level, not every pitch is painted in the most pristine fashion.
That shouldn't be a barrier to it either.
Sure. But it's an aspect.
Even for intercounty, it may be difficult to see when you're at ground level to be able to see, well, was that over the 20-metre line or was it inside out? And if you make the wrong call and it's the last minute of a game and all of that comes into play. So the advance mark hasn't really been a success. It hasn't really done what it was supposed to do. This change obviously will help it, but in practice, I'd like to see the practice of that and to see will it really work from a referee's point of view. So far, the referees seem to be happy about it. There was a game last weekend, actually, another sandbox game between Dublin and Armagh development teams, and from what I understand, and a number of intercounty managers were at it, they were very pleased with how it went, and all the feedback so far is good on all of these enhancements. So much so that they are confident that they're going to draft them and send them in.
Well, I guess that brings us to the political aspect. I dare say, along with his just relentless thoroughness, part of the reason Jim Gavin is meeting everybody, 60, 70 meetings, and every stakeholder you could think, even the Gaelic Writers Association, I was reading, is to bring everybody with him politically, because this does have to go to Special Congress 30th of November. The plan, as I understand it, is if these are passed, then trial in the national leagues, a mid-season review, which I interpreted as a let's reassess things after the leagues, and then we go full steam ahead into the championship. No warm-up competitions. I saw you writing about that recently, so that puts an extra bit of pressure on the managers and the leagues. I suppose the question to ask is, and you've touched on it, Colm, you think the feedback is good thus far. These games on television probably have outsized importance, unfortunately. I mean, it's small sample size. You can get great games even with the current rules, or you can get average games, as we know. Say you get average games for whatever reason, it's only 4 games, it's a small sample size, but say the country at large is talking about it, writing about it, podcasting about it, saying, no, that just did not work. Where, you know, so the politics of this thing is fascinating as well.
Yeah, but the other thing, yeah, well, like it's going to be the biggest GA story of the year from February, the last week in January.
How many columns are you going to knock out about this now too?
Well, it depends if Colm gets in there first, but like they're going to have huge manager reaction all the time. But I think what the exciting thing about it is, and there's definitely an acceptance on the part of the FRC that this opportunity won't come around again for a while. Generally speaking, you don't have an FRC every second year. So they want to be as thorough as possible and as radical, if that's what is needed, as possible. But I think what it will do is that, like you speak to, you know, you see Cian O'Neill, for instance, going from Galway to Kerry. Like, there's a lot of the same kind of coaching brains have been very influential on Gaelic football at the elite level the last few years. And the reason that they are where they are is because they have all the analysis, they've all the numbers, they've all the opposition footage, and they've conceived of this way of playing football. Now people are going to have to think a lot more. What do we do with the 3 back? Do we rotate the players inside? So we're going to see, if nothing else, okay, there's going to be a bit of entertainment in the misapplication and the controversies and the reaction that come from it. But we're going to see a different version of Gaelic football. We're going to have to see teams and coaches and managers use different parameters for the first time in a long time. And I think that's a very exciting
thing. I think it's a coach's dream to be actually facing into some of these.
But you agree with Colm, your sense is the games will happen on television and it will get the nod from Congress?
Well, I would think so. I think if ever if you want to call them a sub body, such as the FRC is, insofar as they're not a permanent body, if ever they were going to win the required political backing, I think it's probably this one, because Gavin, I think, is also a member of the Standing Rules Committee for the purposes of being in constant contact. And I would imagine that he has, you know, clearly Jarlath Burns is going to be very much backing this all the way. So, like, special Congress in November is the one. Like, what we're looking at here is, they're called core enhancements, but to get from there and to what we're talking about into a proposed rule in terms of wordings and how it affects the GA rule book, there's a lot of kind of technical machinations that come up. So they'll have to be as thorough as possible. But my sense of it is, I mean, it would be easy to say, well, if you're proposing 7 rule changes, there's maybe 2 or 3 duds that you're just thrown in there to get the 3 or 4 important ones back. But my sense from the FRC is they're very keen on all of them.
I suspect Gavin as well has balanced out these rule changes to come together as a package. You could cherry pick 2 and then that could actually put the whole thing out of kilter. And the sandbox games have obviously been played with all of them put into use. Sorry, I interrupted you. You were about to say you think coach's dream?
Coach's dream. I think so. I think to be able to, I think this is a great challenge for coaches, because really, before this, it was the coaches were dictating the game instead of the game dictating to the coaches. Now, with these rules, I sense that the game will now be dictating to the coaches, or will be challenging the coaches, maybe more so than the coaches. Coaches have challenged the game, and obviously they've won, really, in many respects. I mean, some teams have been brilliantly coached to advance maybe, further than what they should be, which is great in one respect, but the terms of reference here, there's 8 terms of reference, and some of the words exciting, dynamic, entertainment, engaging, those words are in 4 of the terms of reference.
We used that about our podcast actually in our meeting last
there you
week.
go. They're very similar. They're on very similar paths. So that's what they're looking for.
Yeah.
And obviously that's what they've gone after in many respects. The 2013 FRC that brought in the black card, and just to point out that it wasn't Joe Brolly's rant that precipitated the black card on RT. The actual legislation for that was brought in 6 months before that, the 2013 Congress. So the black card got in, but a number of other proposals, included the kick-out mark, failed because Congress would have said at that stage, we've given you the black card, that's enough for now. Mm-hmm. So that was political as
Yes,
much as anything.
yes, okay.
The kick-out mark should have got in then. It got in 3 years later, but it should have gone in then.
But there is that
at
dimension.
time.
We'll give you
There is that. We'll give you something. But I think that's changed.
Okay.
I think there's a realisation that this is it. Speak now and act now or forever be silent on it. I think this is a huge opportunity that everybody would be prepared to go with, and I think a lot of the managers who would have been the soapboxes in the past for opposing rule changes and the game is fine and everything is fine, I think deep down there's a realisation something has to change. Maybe they won't all get through, but I suspect a lot of them. And there are other rule changes as well. Obviously, there are other proposals around the stop clock and how to determine an extra time, the score to determine a win in extra time, and
vanishing
some
foul.
changes in terms of cynical play, and that a tackle where a player holds up an opponent deliberately but doesn't bring him to ground, that's now going to be a black card offence.
Good.
That's straight away. I mean, that could have been done at any stage, and it was correct.
That was the failing with the black card rule.
It was, because now you had to bring your opponent to ground deliberately. Now, if you hold him up almost like a choke tackle, well, that's going to be included as a black card offence. And I think the solo and go.
Yeah, it's
I
very
think
good.
that's going to really transform.
Solo and go.
So you don't need to take. So if you foul me,
Oh, yeah.
I don't. Nobody actually has to kick. I can run the ball like you do in international rules, and similar to.
Or like rugby, Conor, which you'll really like. So it's a tap and go in rugby. Is that what's crept in here?
Well, you have to borrow from the best.
You
But,
do.
but the other one as well, that's very much an Aussie rules thing.
Yeah.
Is that, so say you inhibit me then taking the free, as a lot of people do. Declan Rice being the example in the Premier League recently. If you are seen to being deliberately holding up the play, the ball has moved forward 50 metres. Wow. So it's far more punitive. And I don't think they want to bring it in so that they're constantly moving it forward 50 metres. I think they want it to actually be a deterrent, so people just don't do it anymore.
And the other one, dissent. If a manager or someone from the sideline shouts in at the referee or gives dissent, there's a 13-metre free being. I presume that's going to make the proposals too. So a manager shouts at a referee or disputes something with a referee, there's a 13-metre free at the other end. So they've really gone after dissent and delay and tactical fouling, as well as the rule enhancements. They've gone after a lot of other elements to clean up the game and speed it up.
There are club managers sitting up a bit straighter with that one.
I'd say so. That's going to be that's going to be controversial,
time.
as much as anything. I mean, who said what? Yeah, that's really going to, and that's the one that could fail.
Sure,
something like that is more. They'll special Congress will take out some of those other ones.
Okay.
And there's a lot of free takers around, just to finish off the conversation, who will be a little bit nervous by the idea that the referee will now have a vanishing foam spray like they do. And so you often, it's very instructive to watch free takers now, particularly inter-county level, when they're going over to the ball and where they stand and then where it is that they tie their shoelaces and how many steps they take. And no, from now on it's going to be much more precise.
Okay. Very interesting times. Fellas, brilliant. Colm Keys and Conor McKeon there, both covering GA for the Irish Independent Family. More meat on the bone, by the way, since we spoke to the guys about the nature of these games on TV. 18th and 19th of October at Croke Park. And I suppose even just the managers now involved of these interprovincial sides, again, I think it just speaks to the Jim Gavin effect. He commands respect. This is no joke. And so best of the best are involved. Pádraig Joyce is going to manage Connacht.
It's brilliant.
John Cleary, the Cork manager, will take charge of Munster. Desi Dolan's going to do Leinster. And the Fermanagh manager, Kieran Donnelly, is going to manage Ulster. Thoughts on international rules revival? Did it kind of get any juices flowing, or did you agree with the lads that one, logistically calendar doesn't really work, and two, international rules without the violence, not that much interest? Like, it was kind of a wet blanket of it, lads, is it coming back conversation. It was kind of poo-pooed on both fronts, really.
I do agree with that front. I think there's so much nostalgia with international rules, but it is back in the noughties. It is very much Barclays man stuff. It's our version of Barclays man, all those fights and the and it's not even the fights and the violence, and obviously the Graham Geraghty thing is ugly, but I even remember some of the montages that RTE would do after the games, Peter Canavan squaring up to Barry Hall. Like this sort of carry on was amazing. I think Colm put it perfect. I always remembered Kieran McGeeney, like the one player that could stand his ground. If he was pinned down, every time an Irish player was pinned down, it was a little bit depressing. You felt it in your stomach because they were so helpless. They had to just lie there and accept that this strong, more athletically, somebody who seemed trained in fighting had to just be on top of him, and you just had to accept. Except Sean Marty Lockhart, who Colm left out. He was the other player who could hold his own as well, but he was a bit more sly about it, I think. I remember a very famous clip where the shot cut to him. He was walking away and a player was screaming at the ref and his nose was busted. And it's a shame that I'm glorifying that, but that's sort of what the international rules. Yeah, that's the space it held.
That's where we have to go. And of course, nobody wants to see this.
No, we don't want to see that type of thing.
That's what you have to say. Yeah, so that kind of seems dead in the water. It's interesting. The Australians are more interested than the Irish, it would appear. On the rules situation, you play, watch, adore Gaelic football. So do you like the sound of what Gavin's cooked up here?
I would have always been against rule changes, as a principle, because the game is so big, it's so popular. Just leave it alone. But it's changed too much over the last few years. I never liked the idea that we should change the game because it was defensive, because teams were defending. But I think the response to defending teams is the real problem now. And the lads touched on it there. It's too easy to keep the ball in GA, and now teams know they can keep the ball, they're allowed to. Like, it's been normalised keeping possession. It's the right thing to do, quote unquote. So once that's happening now for minutes and minutes and minutes, we can all agree that we can have a better product here. And it's not about trying to get back to some halcyon days where players kick the ball away. It's about just trying to have a bit more competitiveness and a bit more speed. Like, we used to take so much pride in how fast Gaelic games were. Like, obviously the hurling still has it, and that's a bit of a gripe and an ongoing. And that shouldn't be the case. Football fans and hurling fans shouldn't be arguing every summer about which sport is better. But I think it's really high time that we do look at something anyway. And I say that as somebody who would have been automatically opposed to any rule changes. And some of the school of thought isn't it great that the GA secured rights to show these games on TV? Of course they have. It's going to be more interesting than any games that we've seen in the last few years. This is going to be so worth watching. Like, how will this look? We've got proper managers in place. We've got proper players. We've got a bit of competition element.
It's fascinating, and I hope that the managers are sort of briefed to an extent by Gavin. Like, if you're Pádraig Joyce, and we've seen how Galway line up, and they at most leave two in the opposition half, like, Pádraig, coach how you'd coach if this is an All-Ireland semi-final. You know the way in the National League we're saying, God, these games are great, they're that bit more open because there's less pressure. That could give us a false reading here. These are exhibition matches, therefore managers may think, well, let's go and play a bit of football. Let's leave 4 up. But if that's not reflective of what happens in the white heat of championship, then it undermines what we're seeing a little bit. So there are all of these complicating factors with this.
There definitely would have been value in bringing in someone whose job that was. Like, we're bringing in a fifth team, or we're bringing one of the managers of one of the 4 provinces. They are coming in to try and spoil us. Look at the new rules and tell me the worst case scenario here, or how you can beat the system, and let them try it out. I mean, if you think back of the criticism, which is strange, that Carlo got back in the day with Turlough O'Brien and Stephen Poacher, who done an amazing job, but the way they played wasn't everybody's cup of tea. But if you took them and asked them to now do the same thing with a weaker team in this game, how would it pan out? Yeah,
all of those sorts of things. Even the 2 points for a score outside the 40. So on an exhibition night, and you're the manager, and it's maybe the weather's good, fellas, pop them out, have a go. Why not?
Yeah.
But maybe championship time. If any of you try a fucking 45-metre shot for 2 points, we don't do that as a team.
Yeah.
You don't know yet who'll embrace that, who won't embrace it, how it'll sit. So, yeah, look, it's going to be really, really interesting. But there's just like it's fascinating, the Gavin aspect. It's like him in charge, everybody follows, and has just kind of commanded this seriousness about the whole project. Because a committee like this could have been dead at the knees and scoffed at, and the rules committee, but actually this kind of does feel like a moment. Yeah, and like I think you said, I thought we were just having a cup of coffee and talking about kicking the ball a bit more. That's not going to happen under Jim Gavin. I mean, we are looking at things for a very specific reason. It's going to be interesting to see how it pans out. Yeah, well, we'll see. So 18th and 19th of October, those games are on TV. We'll all get a look. That is pretty much us done. Again, email us, get in touch, indosportpodcast@independent.ie. Myself and Conán will be back tomorrow. Gary Breen on the show tomorrow. Dan McDonald's going to be on as well. Rovers in action in Europe. There's an Irish Republic of Ireland squad announcement. International week is upon us next week. So all of those things to look forward to. Conor, thanks. Thank you.